Thank you. Thanks for inviting me here on this beautiful day. It feels like we've all been living in Vancouver for the last year, weather-wise. Or Victoria, Rob. It's worse there, right? I want to do what I wanted to do with the next half hour of all of our lives was to talk for, say, 20 minutes or so of my half hour and leave some time at the end for questions. Because in my experiences, questions, and it's even sometimes my answers, are of greater use and edification than anything I might say. So to up the edification quotient, though, I thought I would compress into this very, very short period of time a brief biography of myself and how I came to, quote-unquote, the writing life, and then provide you with basically a summary of everything I know about challenging and overcoming the biggest problem to the writing life, or to writing generally, and that is getting started. How all the things that prevent you from getting started, I've basically boiled down to 6, and I have answers for you as to how to not allow any of those 6 demons to possess your soul. So quickly, I was, let's start. That was about maybe 2 minutes. It's 1:07. Did I do the math? Okay, good. I was always loved writing. I remember, I don't even know if kids learn this in school anymore, but handwriting, you know, and you remember in class you would write in your notebook or on the chalkboard in those kind of, between those lines, and you'd learn to write cursive within, you know, this kind of treble clef. And I remember finding this so beautiful, you know, just the physical act of writing was exciting to me. I was a nerd. And I would go around the house all the time obsessively writing in the air and writing stories and with this imaginary pen, and my mother would follow me around. It drove her crazy. And so she would follow me around with this imaginary eraser and rub it out. That's my mother now. She put an implant into my head, and every time I say something, it's a buzzer. It hurts. So I was writing through my childhood, writing little stories and stapling them together and publishing my books. And my mom, here she is again. Oh, no, that's okay. Thanks, Mom. She uncovered in the basement this my first quote-unquote published book, and it's called The Dream, and I had forgotten all about it. And it has, here's the funny thing about it. It's this little stapled together, little short story, and I did the cover, and there's a New York Times quote on the cover. And here's the funny part, on the back, in the inside page, there's a copyright. I was 8. And it says, for no reproductive purposes. And my corporate, I think I was copying other authors and other books I'd seen, was Andrew Pyper Enterprises, Inc. And jump ahead 30 years, I did form a personal corporation, and my lawyer said, you need to give it a name. And I was like, Andrew Pyper Enterprises, Inc. And I hadn't remembered that until my mom, it was off the top of my head, and my mom uncovered this book, and indeed, you know, that is the name of my corporation. So I go to high school, and all along, by the way, I should add, I never thought you could make a living writing fiction. That was just my working presumption, and it's largely true. But I always felt that there was a power in writing, and that both personally there was a joy and a pleasure in the doing of it, as well as occasionally you could get reactions from people. And I would write, when I was in high school, I wasn't I wasn't the star of the football team or the hockey team, and so but I liked girls. And I wanted them to like me, and there wasn't an immediate or obvious way for me to convince them of that. And so I started writing them poems. I would write these poems, and again, my mom collected these, and they're dreadful, they're awful, but it worked. I did all right. and it was largely poems, like "I love you so much," "Your hair glistening," cliche, but there was a sense of like, oh, this can work. This is an audience. This can persuade. I went to university studying English, of course, because here's some more time to read with the ostensible purpose of doing something. But I was, of course, reading all along, and I went to McGill and studied English, got an MA in English. And then what do you do with an MA in English? Went to law school, and I hated that. Hated that right from the very beginning, but I was brought up that once you start something, you don't quit, which is really, really bad advice. I think quitting is actually a really, really good thing to do. Quit reading books that you don't like. That's my new thing too. It's been if it's not working for you in 50 pages, there's so many books out there. Throw it away. Well, not throw it away. Give it away. And the same thing too, I think, is true for your own writing projects. That it shouldn't be that hard. Writing is difficult, but it shouldn't be so hard that you hate the thing. And so quit projects a lot more frequently than we've probably mostly been brought up to do, because it shouldn't be that unpleasant. There should always be a pleasure in the thing. I gave myself how are we doing here? Oh, good. I rewarded myself after graduating from law school, and I had no money, so I articled on Bay Street and had no intention of being a lawyer. I just wanted to make the money, and for that year. And I remember I was writing the whole time. I mean, through my undergrad, I was publishing short stories here and there. Through law school, I was published my first book, a collection of short stories, and I just couldn't stop it. Right? It's just this, and I still have my law notes from my classes, and they would always start off, trying to be a good student, trying to take down what the professor was saying, and it would always devolve into, in the current tax year, Section 342 of the Income Tax Act stipulates that income provided in the. She walked into the room. She looked my way. It would always turn out to be the second half was a short story. And I squeaked by, and I remember when I was working on Bay Street, I hated that even worse. And I remember the big case I worked on in my 1 year was this case of litigation where it was, when you drive by Oshawa, there's you go by the GM head office there, and there's a marsh there, and it's a protected natural preserve. Ducks and birds like it there, and we were on the side of a gravel company that wanted to dig up the marsh. Yeah, I know. But my heart was with the ducks. And the ducks, when we had this big Bay Street firm, it was like, me and 8 other guys, and the ducks had like, one pro bono guy who, I'm not even sure he was a lawyer, and we just, we decimated them, but it's now, I think, the ducks are somewhere else now. But my point is that I was working on a file late one night, and the main partner came in. It was midnight, and he surprised me. And there on my screen was a short story I was working on. I wasn't working on the memo I was supposed to be doing. And he said, "Pyper, what is that?" And I said, "It's a short story, sir." And he gave me a look, like I'd said, it's plans for a bomb, sir. And he didn't bother me again after that. I mean, I wasn't involved I never had to work till midnight again. Yet another advantage to writing. Upon graduation, though, I took off. I haven't practiced law for a day, I'm proud to say. I moved to Peterborough, and where rent was cheap, and worked on my first novel, Lost Girls. And quite literally, when the book was finished and it was with my agent, I was broke. The money was all gone, and I was submitting my resume to local Peterborough pubs to be a bartender, because I'd much rather, and this is true today as it was then, rather be a bartender than a lawyer. And the book was, to my surprise, picked up here in Canada and in the United States and in the UK, and I've been able to write fiction full-time since then. So which gets me to my kernels of juicy diamonds of advice that I've learned over, again, sort of the last 12 years of doing it full-time, and that is, And here's the surprising fundamental insight I have. And it's surprising because it's going to probably run against a lot of the preconceptions, or at least the understanding most of us have about what is required to write fiction. And that is that your biggest enemy is, in fact, the thing that you thought all along was your elusive friend: inspiration. The concept of inspiration is your greatest foe. That is who you should be up against, because to court inspiration, or worse, wait for inspiration, to wait for the muse to sing, is death. Inspiration is a romantic concept, right? I mean, it was basically born out of the 19th century of the idea of the artist Wordsworth, right? Sort of going for a walk in the hills and voices coming to him, and him returning to the desk and transcribing the whisperings of God. Well, we wouldn't get much work done if we had to wait for God to whisper. So that's the main thing. And then my next 6 points, my next 6 tips really all go back to that kernel of don't think of what we're all trying to do as hinging on inspiration, but rather treat it as a job. Now, it's the most amazing job in the world. I don't mean job in the sense of, oh God, somebody shoot me. I mean job in the sense of a vocation. And you have to apply yourself to that, and not sort of, it's the opposite of magic. So the first tip is about your office space. Attractive, comfortable, well-lit offices are the enemy of writing. Embrace. I have a friend, this is awful, she's not here. And she doesn't have a buzzer in my brain, but she married very well second time around, and her husband is retired and very, very wealthy, and so they've built their own monster home south of like up around Collingwood on a hill overlooking these fields. And her office is on the top floor. It has a sort of, it's her only thing on the floor, and she has windows on every side, and this gorgeous antique desk where she could see Georgian Bay on clear days. And I remember visiting her and going up into her office and thinking, you're never going to write anything in here. There's never going to be a book that comes out of this room. It's too pretty. Why would you write when you could, have a nap on that leather thing, and there's the plasma screen, click. So surround your working world with discomfort. Turn down the heat in winter, crank up the AC in summer, and most importantly, avoid views. Close the curtains, for God's sake. Up until about a year ago, when we have 2 kids now, it forced us out of this house, but it was a great little house, very uncomfortable. And my office was in the basement. It smelled funny, and my office space had a window where you could just see the sidewalk. And the window was the size of like a mass market paperback. And so light never was a problem. And there were mice. We had rodents. And it was great for work. I hated it. I hated going down there, and I did so much good work there because I hated it, right? Because there were no distractions. There was a sense of there's nothing to do in this room but work. And I was on a conference call one day with producers in London who had optioned one of my books, and we were talking about, it was a very important call for me, and I was, we got to the end, and it was very collegial. At the end, toward the end, I felt this tug on my foot. And I looked down, and I was trying to poison the mice. And so, but as you know, the mice poison, the way it works is that they ingest it and it dehydrates them, so they come out. They don't just go away and die. They come out to die. And so this guy was stoned, and he was chewing on my shoelace. And I shook him off, but he came back. I felt him, he was like, this was his death chew. And I said on the phone as we were signing off, I said to the British producers, I said, well, here's to, no mice chewing on your shoes. And there was this long pause, and then they said, well, cheerio to you, too. I think they thought it was a Canadian euphemism, like. So, here's to mice on your shoes. So yes, embrace your discomfort in your small room, and that's inadequately heated. Number two, there's no such thing as writer's block. This is the great myth of why aren't you working today? Oh, I have writer's block. As though you could go to the doctor and they could give you an MRI. It's like, yeah, there it is. You got writer's block. You think too that if you didn't show up to your normal regular job, for those of you who have those, for a week, say, and you didn't call in, and you showed up 6 days later, and okay, I'm here now. I mean, would your boss accept the excuse, well, I had job block? No, you'd be fired. So if you see what you have to do, if you see the work ahead as more in a more job-like way, you'll see that there are no excuses from it. You got to show up. You got to show up, or you're fired. And very quickly, here's one way to an exercise I find helpful on the days where I feel like I want to say I have writer's block, is to be a notebook nerd. Always take a notebook or a pad, I guess, or electronic now devices with you, and go out into the world, get out of that small, too cold office, and just record. Record something you see. No description, not a story, just reportage. There's a man in an orange shirt putting a tee in the ground, he's striking the ball, just the facts. And it's amazing how that pulls you away from the sense of, I have to write. Writing is it's such a complicated thing. That just reporting what you see or hear can often break that sense of blocking. Number two excuse is, my story is boring. I'm kind of bored by my own story. If you feel that way, you're right. It is boring. If you feel that way about the thing you're working on, I can promise you a third party is going to think that even more. So one way to get through that, if you're feeling like, I'm halfway through this thing, it's boring me, is to make something happen, something unexpected. Raymond Chandler, the great noir mystery writer, said, when in doubt, have a man come through the door with a gun in his hand. And it's very, very good advice. And you don't necessarily have to have a guy with a gun come into your story, but make something happen, something unexpected happen, something even absurd happen. Have someone die, have a chandelier fall on someone's head. And it will help the story, not just because now something's happened, which is better than nothing happening, but more importantly, you will see how the characters in your piece respond to this weird thing. Who's the person who runs from the room when the chandelier falls? Who stays to see if the person is all right? Who's under the chandelier and what do they say? What's the first words out of their mouth? Aside from, ouch. But once you make something happen, it's amazing how that sense of, this is boring, goes away. Number four, I'm stuck. That sense of I'm stuck. I'm sort of overwhelmed. I think the way to get through I'm stuck is outlines. I'm a evangelical supporter of outlines. I get more passionate about outlines than more or less. Well, there's two things I guess I get more excited about. But outlines are the key, I think, to avoiding I'm stuckness, because if you create an outline in advance for your story, and I do this, I sort of have a timeline that goes from my ceiling to the floor, and it's the events in detail of the entire novel. I never get lost, I never get stuck, and you can jump around. Here's the great liberty. You can jump around. You don't have to go back to, where was I yesterday? I have to continue on from there. You can jump around, and depending on your mood, right? You might be like, I feel like a sex scene today. You can go, I have one. I'll go right to it. I don't have to wait. The danger there, of course, is that your novel ends up just being pornography. But that's better than being stuck. Number 5, I don't know how to start. You know, I have an idea, I just don't know how to start. Start with people. Here's an exercise. Start with people talking. This is a writer's exercise tip that that has been imparted to me, and it's amazing how easy and how well it works. I'm going to wind up here, be really, really quick. But here's the exercise. 1, begin with a character. Give that character a name. Naming is important. Name gives immediate character traits. You get, as soon as you name someone, they're real. Create a second character who has a significant relationship to the first, and give that character a name. Maroon those characters in a place you know well. They have to be away from the world. And give your first character some life-changing news. You're going to die in a week. Or, you know, your mother has passed. Or aliens have come and they want you. And now write a page or two about what happens between the two characters, what they say. I guarantee if you set up this little game, you will be well on your way to a short story, at least. You just get two people talking, and they start talking, and next thing you know, they're doing things. Finally, number 6, and my final point, but don't I need symbols and themes and ideas first? Symbols and themes and ideas are your enemy. Write a story. Don't proceed from ideas, but from event. If you describe people talking, doing things, things happening, ideas and themes and symbols will arise out of that. Those things arise from story, not vice versa. So don't worry about it. Those things are important, but important to readers, not to us in making the story. So finally, that's it. That is everything I know about everything. But lastly, don't forget the pleasure in the thing. You know, when I have really bad days or weeks, I have a writer friend who always reminds me, remember that in the work, there's pleasure in the work. There's joy in the work. And we talk about publishing and e-publishing and rights and royalties and agents. But remember the joy that you take in just creating a good line. So I'll stop there. I've gone on maybe a little bit, but any questions?
Hi, Andrew.
Hi.
And I got to say, I love your books. I've read them all.
Oh, nice.
What I find is you seem, and don't take this the wrong way, you seem a little unusual. Kiss Me. I mean that in the nicest possible way. No, I mean, you have Kiss Me, which is like Toronto stories, it seems. Lost Girls seem to be up north more. Wildfire Season, you know, all over the place. You don't see that a lot in writers now. They seem to kind of stick to certain themes or certain areas. Why go that route?
Just the accident of inclinations, you know, that you spend, in my case, you know, generally 3 years on a book, and I have to be interested in it, in all of its senses, and it can include, you know, where the thing is set, and so going somewhere else or changing things up, or every book is a I mean, I'm sure I have editors who'd wish, like, could you just create a character and do, you know, have him or her do stuff for 22 books. But I just, that doesn't appeal to me. So it's fun to create a whole new, for me that's the fun of it, is creating a whole new world, and not sort of, here's the 9th novel in my Saskatoon series. No, nothing wrong with Saskatoon. Actually, Swift Current is the one that really sucks. Have you ever been to Swift Current? That place sucks.
Thank you for taking my question.
My pleasure.
My question is about characters. When you write your fiction, you develop intense attachment to the characters. How do you let them go?
Oh, how do you let them go? It's hard, actually, you know, because you're quite right. You do feel very attached to them, and it's. I find with a lot of the time in looking back on books that I've already written and the characters that I've created, and I know I won't return to, there's a kind of there's a bittersweetness to it, I guess. It's that as much as there's a letting go, it's kind of like an ex-lover, you know, that you can remember that relationship sweetly, but you don't necessarily want to return to it. Oh, well, maybe you do. But you can remember that great summer. Remember that summer we had? But I'm older now.
Hi, you've probably been asked this before many times. How do you avoid your plotting outline from becoming formulaic, making it a paint by numbers? For novels, I understand plot outline. What about for short stories, though, short fiction?
Yeah, I think two good questions. I think the outline is not, and it shouldn't be in correspondence to some kind of formula that we all have read about, the 3-act structure or this kind of stuff. Never mind that. It's just a series of events. We all say, I've got a great idea for a story. What the outline does is it tests, really, what is that story? Oh, well, it's about this woman who well, I don't know how she gets there. Oh, well, then you end up answering your own questions. And then you can, once you have that beginning, middle, and end, as it might happen sequentially, then you can start, here's the interesting part, you can start playing with how and when things occur. So what in fact is maybe the middle, chronologically, of your story, you realize, oh, that's actually a really cool way to begin it. I'll start with the golf cart turning over on her head, and move up to that. I'll begin, I'll actually begin with that, and then let's go back to when she started golfing, before the terrible golf cart incident. So an outline, I actually think, is a force against formula. It pushes back at formula, and because it's a way of looking at the whole story from an overview at the beginning, and then messing with it, playing with it. And I also think outlines can be very useful in short stories too. I don't think they tend to be you're right, more intuitive, instinctual things. But I think an outline, it could be just a sort of a napkin or where I want to go. But I think they're very useful. Having a pre-document, I find very useful.
Thank you very much, Andrew. That ends our Q&A. Rose Cronin.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.